See, this is what surrender is. You enter a moment when there is no self-concern, and there is as a higher force takes over. You see, surrender is not something you do. Surrender is an understanding, seeing very clearly. There are two kinds of surrender: conscious surrender and unconscious surrender. Now let's discuss unconscious surrender, because it's happening all the time. It's unconscious. Unconscious surrender means that it happens when every time you act, think, walk, eat, sleep, or do anything. It's all unconscious surrender. Did you know that? Very few people are aware of that. We're unconsciously surrendering all the time. Suppose you put a morsel of food in your mouth and you start thinking, maybe I can swallow it. You know you can choke? Because swallowing is unconscious surrender. And then it's assimilated, distributed, you see? It knows what to do. It is digested and then eventually eliminated. It's all done unconsciously. Okay? In other words, without our need to think about it or control it. That's unconscious surrender. It's the same with anything. Suppose you're going down the stairs, which you do every day, but there are 100 stairs, you see? This time you start thinking about your feet. You'll trip. Did you know that? Because it's not unconscious surrender. You see, now when we say unconscious, means that you're not thinking about it. That's the reason we say unconscious. It means it's being done without you doing it. It's become a habit. Okay? And we can talk, we can go into unconscious surrender about every facet of life. Whether it's sitting down, whether it's standing, whether it's walking. We take everything for granted. We do not realize the power of our being, doing everything through us. But of course we think it's us doing it. Even thinking happens to us. Even emotions happen to us. Many times you get depressed. You don't say, well, I think I'm going to get depressed now. Everything happens to us. And this is where surrender comes in. You see? Conscious surrender. The very understanding of what is taking place. And that understanding, you know, because in all the great teachings say surrender, surrender. You see? Surrender really also means making a shift. You are a human being. The human is part of what we call the egoic self. That's always involved with thinking. Always becoming, needing, wanting, striving. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the human. It's always becoming, becoming, becoming. It never arrives, but it's always becoming. You see? Because even when you arrive, you want $1 million. When you get $1 million, you want more. Right? So it's never enough. The being is. Be. No, the big question, to be or not to be. You see? That is the whole crux of the matter. Being itself is complete. Being is surrender. The human does not want to surrender. I want to get my own way. I want to be in control. So who is it that surrenders? You see? No one. You cannot surrender because the human will not surrender and the being does not need to. So what is it that happens in surrender? Understanding it. And that's what we're doing today. Okay, understandings. Because once you understand surrender, I'm repeating myself, that is the whole point. So how do we come to the point of understanding surrender? There is one thing that has to be made very, very clear. There is only one will. There isn't your will and his will or her will or God's will. There's only one will. Of course, in miracles, incidentally, if you're familiar with that, makes it very, very clear. There's only one will. The will of that which is. You can call it the will of God, the will of the divine. There's only one will. You might say, well, what about my will? What is your will? And it is the one will when you get down to it. So here we come to a very crucial point. What is it that you want more than anything? Now some people say, I know what I want. 99.9% you don't, even though you say you do. Why? You might say, well, I want a career in art, or I want to be a writer, or what I want is to be happy, or I want to have $1 million. But the question is, why? Why do you want it? You see? And you'll find that what you really, really want is what everybody else wants. But if you put words to it, you goof it up. You see, many times we say what we really want is truth. And that's the truth, really. What we really want is truth. But we have ideas what truth is. So it's best to leave it, not to discuss the word truth. Because the moment you use the word truth, you have an idea what truth is, and then you have a concept, and you live from that concept. Truth is so all-encompassing that any words you put to it are a prostitution of truth. Because truth is. Now that's what we want, that is. So we can say that what we truly want more than anything is a feeling. But not an emotional feeling. You know, whether you're a drug addict, whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're in love, or whether you love something, it doesn't matter. You love your children or your family. What drives you for that feeling? You see? Are we understanding what that feeling? That feeling is like, we can call it the feeling of being in love. That feeling of total and complete inner security and inner safety. But even they fall apart when you compare it to what it is that you really, really are. You see, it's being called bliss. In the Lord's Prayer we call it heaven. You see? So, you know, we can call it the kingdom of God within. But these are words. Because even when a person becomes, quote, totally enlightened, and they are in love with it, because it is not something just it, you can never say they've arrived. When Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi was asked, you know, and he was passing away from the body soon, he was, you know, he was saying if he's there home, he says, yeah, he's home, but he's still growing. It's still, there is no end to this incredible isness, you see? And in the beginning we don't know it. So we're happy to be happy. You see? You know, we get $1 million and we're happy for a week or so, you know, until all the neighbors want something from us. Or you buy a new car, a Ferrari, and you're just great until you get worried about being scratched, somebody stealing it or making payments. So in other words, we have moments of being happy and fulfilled, but they're temporary. But why is it so important? Why do we want it? Why do we want to be happy? Why do we want to be fulfilled? You see? Because we can't help it. It is our true nature. And there's no limit to that. So that feeling is. Now how you begin to discover that? By asking yourself, what is it that I really, really want? And being honest. Now if you happen to be very physical, then you're going to come up with something physical. And it's okay, because you're being honest. You see? You might say, well, what I want most right now is a drink. You're being honest, if you meant it. You see? Or right now what I want is to buy a home. That is fine. But what you begin to know what you really, really want from that is by asking yourself, what do I want a home? You see? I want it because it gives me a feeling of comfort, security, safety. You see? Makes me feel good, somewhere to go home. So it's always driving us towards that. Now, when you begin to question everything, what is it that I really want from this? You find there's something deeper underneath, pulling you. You see? And that something deeper is the very understanding, because that When you begin to question everything that you want, and enjoy it, leave it there, don't overcome it or anything, but see what is deeper, what is driving you deeper